مساء الخير، أخباركم إيه؟ أنا عايز أكونفيرم بس لو أنتوا سامعيني. تمام. ماشي، أنا آسر. شغال في مايكروسوفت انجينيرنج مانجر بقالي سنتين. كنت في كاليفورنيا قبلها بحوالي 4 سنين أو 5 سنين قعدتهم هناك، وقبلها كنت في أستراليا برضو كذا سنة. كنت different companies كذا سنة. جوجل فترة، وأمازون فترة، ويوداسيتي فترة. ودلوقتي أنا بليد تيم في موبايل شوبينج في بينج. وهتكلم النهاردة على حاجات ممكن ناس كتير تبقى لسه متخرجة ما قابلتهاش في حياتها وما اتعلمتهاش في الكلية. specifically حاجات ليها علاقة بال باك اند سيرفيس كواليتي، ازاي نبني سيرفيس كويسة. باي سيرفيس أنا أقصد أي حاجة that's customer facing أو حتى internal service that offers a certain functionality. والمشاكل اللي بتقابل أغلب الانجينيرز اللي بيونوا services زي دي في اللايف سايكل، يعني once they launch something إيه اللي ممكن يحصل after it's being public يعني. أول حاجة عايز أبدأ بقصة صغيرة، ويعني دي هتبقى الانترودكشن بتاعت بقية السلايدز. فخليني أنا هجهز بول، بس أنا عايز أعرف رأي الناس في السيناريو اللي هحكيه دلوقتي ده. الانسيدنت دي حصلت هنا في الحقيقة يعني، بس طبعا أنا غيرت شوية تفاصيل هنا. في شركة ما، برضو شركة كبيرة، كان في انجينير عمل فيتشر جديدة. كان مستعجل فإمبلمنتها بسرعة. الفيتشر كانت كومبلكس وللأسف الإمبلمنتيشن بتاعه كان فيها بug. however الباج دي كانت بتحصل in very rare situations، فما كانتش باينة خالص and everything went fine. عملوا merge, they released the service, it was working for weeks، والباج دي موجودة ومحدش يعرف عنها حاجة. تمام. انجينير بي دخل بعدها، حاول يريفاكتور شوية حاجات ويوبتمايز شوية processes. فلما غير الاوردر اوف ايفنتس خلى الرير occurrence بتاع الباج الاولانيه دي a very common occurrence. واللي حصل ان الكود برضو عدى، لان it wasn't tested من الانجينير 1 as a unit test, it wasn't added. فما كانش في حاجه تمنع ان هو يمرج او يريليس الكود الجديد بتاعه. وللاسف once it was launched حصل اوتج كبيره في السيرفيس. وعلشان الموضوع كان very silent، محدش حس بالاوتج دي for a very long time. وابتدوا يلاحظوها بس لما لقوا ان في revenue drop جامد، فابتدوا ينفستيجيتوا واكتشفوا السيناريو اللي حصل. فانا عايز الناس تفوت the four options. Who do you think is at fault? engineer A ولا engineer B ولا واحد منهم ولا الاثنين؟ أنا شايف في فوتس متحيزة لشخص معين. I'll give it يعني one more minute كده نلم كل الفوتس ونشوف. ماشي. أنا معرفش if you can see the answers. I want to present it to the screen بس anyway هو ال result so far engineer A واخد 7 أصوات that is the fault. engineer B صوتين both 6 votes، ومحدش قال neither which is interesting. um, خلينا نموف اون طيب ونتكلم في what what I think the situation was like. I actually think it was neither. I think أي شركة بتبقى متوقعة إن people make mistakes، ولو they have the assumption إن الناس عمرها ما هتعمل غلطات، then obviously they will run into multiple issues. The point of this question أو this exercise علشان نبين إن المشكلة مش في حتة مين كان غلطان ومين المفروض يعمل حاجة صح، لأن حتى لو فعلا حد منهم غلطان، حتى لو واحد منهم أكتر من التاني، حتى لو الاتنين غلطانين، it's not enough إن إحنا نقول خلاص هو الفلان ده اللي غلطان والمفروض ما يعملش كده تاني and that's it. لا. We should have processes, and processes are really what drive the success of any company. البرزنتيشن اللي أنا هحكيها دلوقتي دي مركزة أكتر على my experience من الشركات اللي أنا اشتغلت فيها. إيه البروسيسز اللي هما بيعملوها. There's a lot in common ما بين كل الشركات. وبرضه كل شركة بتimplement certain scenarios, certain processes differently. Typically بيبقى على حسب إيه اللي بيشتغل، وحتى في نفس الشركة ممكن تلاقي teams بتستخدم different processes. فأنا يعني most of يعني what I'll cover في presentation دي is insights on يعني how what's common between these companies and يعني why some of them work. مش هركز قوي على مثلا best practices to improve a process itself as much as just sharing ايه البروسيسز اللي موجودة عامة. لو رجعنا تاني للقصة دي, there's supposed to be many layers of protection to prevent something like this from happening. طبعا يعني I would assume ان اغلب الناس اللي انا عارفة most of these points, design reviews, code reviews, unit testing, دي اغلبها بنعملها من واحنا في الكلية حتى. Integration testing and functional testing دول more focused on teamwork. لما حد بيبقى شغال في كذا حاجة, كل تيم شغال أو كل جروب من التيم شغال في feature مختلفة, there still needs to be some integration testing and functional testing. Functional testing اللي هو end-to-end testing, متأكد إن كل حاجة شغالة من أول ما request يتبعت مثلا لحد ما responses يتعمل. And then user acceptance testing اللي هو يعني ماشي كل حاجة شغالة من غير أي errors, من غير أي exceptions. But is it actually functioning like you expected it would? Load testing is more السيرفيس هيعرف يهندل storm of requests that will get الترافيك اللي هيجي لها. واخر حاجه A/B testing, which يعني probably few heard about, but they don't consider it as a test as much as an experiment. But I think it's also a test. لان يعني at some point انت if you're building a product or a service and you're expecting that users will use it in a certain way, أو you're expecting مثلا إن هي هتزود traffic لحاجة معينة and it doesn't, then you can consider this as much as it's buggy. There's absolutely no difference. فكل layer من دول supposed to pick up bugs at an earlier stage. طبعا at the earlier stage you're picking up more bugs. So hopefully with those layers of protection you should be able to prevent as much issues as you can before they actually reach the customers. لكن زي ما هنشوف في البرزنتيشن that's not always the case. ويعني هنتكلم شوية عن الحاجات اللي بتعدي من كل layers of protection دي. بس قبل ما نتكلم على كده خلينا نبدأ بالستيجز العادية اللي احنا بنمشي فيها, وايه البروسيسز اللي اغلب الشركات بتاخدها علشان تحاول تحسن اللايرز اوف بروتكشنز اللي موجودة في قبل ما نلونش. في الديفلوبمنت ستيج which is يعني very typical لأي حد برضو كتب كود في أي حتة. Most people heard about continuous integration and continuous delivery. I think it's an amazing invention. الاختراع ده ساعدنا ان احنا نعرف نproduce quality code much quicker. and I say quality code لان انت مش بتعتمد على حد معين ان هو يتست ويفيريفاي الكود بتاعه, انت بتعتمد على automated systems to do this for you as long as you're following the process. And the process here requires building unit tests, code coverage, making sure that مثلا there are scripts that run to make sure that any new changes in the code are covered by unit tests. And integration tests. لما الprocess دي implement صح, means that developers can comfortably push whatever changes they make as long as it's not breaking any of those tests. And if it is breaking any of those tests, it will prevent them from actually merging their code. ونفس الكلام في deployment. It's not just about merging your code, it's also about sending it all the way to production. فالthe continuous integration, continuous development, they really helped us accelerate the development process, and it also helped improve the quality and safety for it. حاجة من الحاجات اللي بلاقي الناس بتargue فيها كتير هي what kind of branching should teams use. And I think it's slightly relevant to ensuring the quality of your continuous integration, continuous development. في طرق كتير ممكن حد يمانج بيها code base across a team. بس أنا اللي حاطه هنا يعني لحد ما two different extremes, the trunk based development والgit flow. The trunk base is basically assuming that you should only have one branch, master branch, and everyone's just committing that one branch. مسموح ان انت تعمل مثلا a very short-lived branch to implement فيه a few commits and then you merge it as quickly as possible to the master branch. The git flow is quite the opposite. Git flow بيassume ان يعني اي feature جديدة هتتعمل has to have its own branch. Even when you're implementing a feature, if it's too large, you'll end up creating branches off of that branch. يعني لو بصينا مثلا على flow زي ده, the main branch is very slowly being updated. You also have a develop branch if you want to, and then you're merging features into the develop branch. You can have multiple features running in parallel. Like in a trunk base is very straightforward. People are just committing to the master branch straight away. يعني كل واحد فيهم ليه مزاياهم وعيوبهم, مفيش واحد أحسن من التاني. عشان كده there's always an argument on what to choose, and it depends on what the team is comfortable with. And يعني my point is not to say my advice or my recommendation as much as to show different processes اللي الناس بتستخدم. مزايا الtrunk base is more to simplify the speed of development, and if the processes are implemented correctly, then you will guarantee that anything that you're merging into the code is not affecting the rest of your work. يعني لو فكرتوا فيها مثلا ان اي code base has proper unit tests and proper integration tests that are covering every feature that already exists in the service. فأي حد هيزود أي حاجة جديدة, if it's not breaking either those unit tests or those integration tests, then it doesn't matter حتى لو الفيتشر دي شغالة ولا لا. And if it does break something at the end, ده معناه إن الانتجريشن تيست واليونت تيست اللي كانت موجودة أصلا في الكود is not enough. it kind of forces أي team إن لما يجي release feature جديدة وخايف إن حد يكميت حاجة تبوظها له, it forces them إن هم implementu as many rigorous unit tests and integration tests as possible. And that way anyone can commit any code even if it's not functional yet or it's not working yet, but it won't break anything else. مشكلة الجيت فلو طبعا إنه safer إلى حد ما, لأن مفيش feature هتخش غير if it's fully tested and verified. But by the time you start to merge a feature into the develop branch and then merge the develop branch into the main branch, وخصوصا لو في كذا feature شغالة in parallel, you run into merge conflicts that are not resolved بس بمجرد أنت تقعد تهاك through. يعني ساعات بتحتاج تعمل meetings علشان تعرف to resolve some conflicts and merge conflicts في الكود. لكن يعني it depends on again what kind of processes are implemented and what the team is more comfortable with. أنا هقف برضه at some point كده في النص عشان لو حد عنده أسئلة على اللي إحنا coverناه. ممكن قبل ما نخش في الستيج بتاعت الديبلويمنت we'll take a quick break. بس آخر حاجة عايز أتكلم عليها في الديفلوبمنت هي الكود ريفيوز. A lot of us hear about PRs, pull requests. Again, it's driven by GitHub. الفكرة إن يعني أي حد عايز يmerge code to a public repository, and the same policy applies for internal tools. Someone has to review that code, and the easiest way to review it is through a pull request. أنت عملت commits كتير in a branch, and then you want to merge it. The pull request is the thing that gets reviewed. The process is typically in engineers, team members, seniors. They have a look at the PR, every line of code. They can write comments, and it's a circle. You fix those comments until you're happy with it. And then once the PR is reviewed, everything happens automatically again. لأن تاني احنا مش محتاجين بعد ما حد يصلح حاجات في الكود حد يقعد verify if the actual functionality hasn't been broken after those fixes or not. We have unit tests, integration tests, and all the policies in the pipeline to verify that everything should work. So it simplifies the process even for the code review part. ماشي, خلينا قبل ما نخش في ال deployment and testing أشوف لو حد في الشات عنده أي أسئلة. Doesn't seem like it. يعني I'd prefer لو هتسألوا أسئلة تحطوها في ال Q&A section عشان أعرف أسورد برضه لو في حاجة فاتت. Okay, moving forward. Deploying and testing. يعني we covered the testing part, أو يعني we're familiar with the testing part in the development phase, but the deployment also includes a bit of testing itself. Typically, a شركة that has a large-scale service that's offering to customers would have to have multiple stages or environment for the deployment. مش لازم يبقوا الأربعة كلهم موجودين، بس these are the typical four stages of deployment: the development stage, the testing stage, the staging, and the production. The development is يعني more of a playground، دي اللي بيتحط فيها أي deployment once a code is merged to the master branch. And يعني it can be used to roll back even merge themselves. يعني typically اللي بيحصل إن once you approve a PR or even submit a PR, it tries to build the code to make sure that it's compiling. It will run some tests. لو في أي مشكلة, it will roll back and it will prevent you from even allowing you to merge the PR. Some people might even use a deployment stage to verify that. ممكن الكود يكون بيبيلد عادي, لكن مثلا تيجي ترن على service, you throw an unhandled exception and the service doesn't even launch. So you can use the development stage for a lot of stuff that's يعني beyond actual testing. The testing stage is where خلاص انت خلصت feature and you want to start trying it out internally, just you, including other internal teams. كل ده بيعتمد على الفيتشر نفسها, بس this is where you actually deploy it. It's very separated from the production. No one has access to it except the internal team, and you can start testing it. Staging is an environment that should be identical to the production. لو في أي environment variables that are set, any secrets, any external calls, they should all be exactly the same as production. علشان ما نتستش عليها ونتأكد إن كل حاجة شغالة, وبعدين نيجي نبوش للبرودكشن نلاقي إن علشان الكونفيجريشن كان مختلف أو عشان الأكسس مش موجود, for the service didn't work. Once you pass all these three stages and you're happy with the testing that you've done, then you can promote it to production. And promoting to production is another challenge on its own. We'll get to that. But some interesting points about deployment in general is rollbacks. Again, some of them, the modern tools that help with managing deployment have automated rollback capabilities. يعني انت ممكن زي ما قلنا في حتة التست environment, you can roll back if something just didn't work. You can also roll back after you deploy something if you notice there's a spike in some traffic or errors. The challenge عادة for rollback بيبقى هنعمل ايه في الداتا if we have a database that has been populated with data. Some data stores offer snapshot capabilities علشان you can create a snapshot right before you release a new product, and then if anything goes bad and you want to roll back, you can just roll back to that particular snapshot. It does require some setup, and كل الحاجات اللي أنا بحكيها دي including the policy setups do require a lot of manual work. والحتة برضو اللي أنا عايز أحاول أوصلها للناس إن مفيش حد هيعمل الكلام ده ليك. يعني if you're a developer who's working on a team, you should expect to have the initiative to build these policies and processes. أغلب الوقت أنت بتخش في team well established, بيبقى already في ناس invested وقت في الموضوع ده. It doesn't stop you from improving it, but you still need to know how to improve it in general. And يعني any developer who's working on any service that's live is the owner of that service, and we'll get to some of those points as well moving forward. In terms of different strategies of actually deploying things to any stage, so production or staging حتى, بس يعني more relevantly production. Typically, any service that scales really well, international global services, will be distributed into regions. Data regions دي تبقى على حسب الداتا centers, cloud computing service اللي انت بتستخدمه موجود فيه. And then for each region, you will define how many instances or pods you want to run your service on. تمام? There are two different methodologies of how you want to deploy a new version of your code onto these services. The typical one is the pod by pod deployment. اللي بيحصل إن يعني let's say you have two regions, each region has 3 instances. Once you build your code, everything is working fine. You've tested it on staging, and now you want to deploy it. Deploy on one pod at a time. And the reason you're doing this is that you can divert the traffic away from that pod. فالاثنين pods التانيين هم اللي هيجي لهم كل الترافيك until pod 1 is ready. Once it is, you'll divert traffic away from pod 2 and so on. Obviously, the drawback هنا it's very slow. ما تقدرش تعمل parallel deployment in multiple pods because you will not be able to divert all the traffic into just one pod. So you'll have to gradually do this deployment. Gradual deployment is not necessarily bad. It depends on, again, what you want, what you need. If your scenario is that you're not doing regular deployments once a month or something, it's fine to have this slow deployment. عشان ده برضه بيديك فرصة إن أنت تراقب الtraffic. And if something goes bad, you can roll back those few pods that have the new deployment already. A more optimal scenario, which I've seen in other companies as well, is the blue-green deployment. The assumption هنا إن أنت هيبقى عندك a redundancy of instances. واللي هتعمله إن هتديبلوي البيلد الجديدة أو الكود الجديد onto all the services in the redundant environment. فأنت بتسميهم blue environment and green environment. The green environment is the one that will have the newer code, and the blue environment will not be touched until all the pods in the green deployment in the green environment have the new build. Then you can just start diverting all the traffic away from blue to green. الميزة في حاجة زي كده إن يعني البودز اللي قاعدة في green دي قاعدة idle, so you can deploy it in parallel to all the pods. It's much quicker, and you have more control and power over the diverting of the traffic. فأنت ممكن حتى بعد ما تعمل كده تبدأ deploy just a small percentage of the traffic to the green environment, and while keeping the blue as the main production environment. Monitor your metrics, make sure that everything's fine, and then gradually divert more and more traffic to the green environment. ماشي. اتكلمنا على الديبلويمنت ويعني ال different techniques and strategies. Launching itself is another stage, I would say. And even if you have the capability to deploy your product instantly to all the other users, typically you don't want to do this. And this is where we get back to the A/B testing and some other mechanisms as well for the phased rollouts. Typically انت عايز بعد ما تبقى متأكد ان كل حاجة شغالة ان انت برضو تتأكد ان the users are happy with the service, it's working as expected from a usability point of view, that your goals or metrics are also being achieved as assumed before you launched. Typical limited rollouts are alpha release, beta release, invite-only, and A/B tests. Alpha دول هو internal dog fooding. Beta is just selected users who are willing to try out a new service. Invite only if you want, and this is rarely implemented in most of the live stuff, but you can also try this out. And A/B testing is obviously just randomly selecting different people to try out the new scenario, and then you can actually compare the metrics based on both. Gradual rollout is different in a sense that ان انت مش بتختار مين اللي هيجيله السيرفيس, بس you can only select a certain percentage, and again monitor the traffic, make sure that the users are actually doing what you expect them to do, that there are no errors, and then you can gradually scale. الحته بقى اللي يعني عايز اركز فيها اكتر شويه حته what happens after we go through all these layers of protection, we follow all these procedures, the deployment stages, and then stuff still happen. نفس الكلام اللي حصل engineer A and B. Because I'm sure that in the case of engineer A and B, there were code reviews, there were design reviews, there were unit tests. Maybe some of them weren't covered in that particular scenario, but I'm sure they were enforcing all of these policies. So even if there's a very rigid policy in place, live site incidents still do happen. And that's why any company has to be prepared for release readiness, is what they call it. And قبل ما launch a service جديدة, you have to prove that you're ready to release this new service. By release readiness, the main component is that you have all the monitors and alerts set up for any unusual behavior or activity. Typically, انت بتلink المونitors دول بالseverity alarms, and then there's a dedicated person, on-call person, that's responsible for anything that's happening live at any time of the day. نتكلم عنه شوية ده. And then we'll talk about what they typically do, But the point here is that this on-call person, which is just a developer on the team, and there's a rotation between them, they are owning the service, so they want to make their lives easier. فلما أنا مثلا if I'm owning a service that's كل شوية بيحصل فيها مشكلة, then I should first of all make sure that إن أنا أصلح the root causes of these problems, and make sure that I have proper monitors and alerts so that I'll get notified as early as possible قبل ما المشكلة تكبر. That's a cycle. وهنتكلم على ال DRI وال on-call feedback. When incidents do happen, what should people actually do to actually learn from that experience and fix so it doesn't happen again. ممكن برضو نكون سمعنا عن ال different severity levels بتاعت أي incident in a life site. It usually goes from 1, which is the SEV1, the highest level of impact. يجيب لي معناه إن service واقع مش هيقدر خالص, all the way down to 5, which is يعني just a request. And every service level gets a different reaction from the on-call person, obviously. علشان there should also be a policy of something called the service level agreement, which is basically what a company is offering to their customers as a level of quality. فيعني if every company will come up again على حسب البرودكت على حسب الشركة, they will come up with an SLA for every different severity level. فمثلا if I'm offering a service that's very critical financially مثلا, then a SEV1 has to be resolved in a few minutes. If I'm offering a feature that's not as critical but still pretty important, then a SEV1 SLA should be maybe a few hours. And this SLA is monitored for every incident that gets fired. Typically برضو when an incident that gets fired isn't being resolved automatically, they get escalated to their manager, and the manager gets escalated to their manager, and so on. The responsibility of the on-call person, or the DRI, we call them at Microsoft, designated responsible individual, is very critical. والفلو اللي بيحصل عادة إن let's say the team فيه 6 developers, then every developer takes 1 week and then a break for 5 weeks. During that week, the DRI is expected to be on call for 24/7. Any incident at any time of the day, they have to respond immediately. Most of the time علشان يعني مش منطقي برضه إن إحنا نصلح bugs الساعة 3 الصبح. فاللي بيحصل إن يعني بنحاول mitigate بس the life site issue, usually by rolling back or turning off features until يعني it's work hours again, and then we can start fixing the actual issue. Typically برضه if primary and secondary علشان if the primary is for any reason unable to resolve or mitigate, the secondary can take over. وزي ما قلنا على حسب severity برضه there is an SLA, and for each there is certain requirements. في شركات بتنforce and you have to at least acknowledge the incident straight away within 15 minutes, I think. And then you have to continue giving updates, again, depending on the severity of the incident itself. The few tricks that usually DRI people rely on, مبدئيا stage developments اللي اتكلمنا فيها قبل كده, if you manage to have an older deployment that's readily available, then all you have to do is just divert the traffic instead of actually trying to redeploy an older version or rolling back. This is super helpful for critical services. عشان يعني it's almost instant that you can just divert the traffic straight away. Feature flags is a very useful tool as well. كل اللي بتعمله بس انت بتحتاج تعمل بتزود في الconfiguration file whatever boolean flags that you want to use, وفي الكود نفسه بتcheck لو الفلاج ده true or false, and then you design the feature so that it doesn't work لو الconfiguration false. It might seem a little hacky in the code and انت تبقى قاعد بتcheck كل شوية على boolean من configuration file, but it actually is super helpful. لأن ساعات some features might take a long time to develop, and in that time there might be other features داخلة في النص, فبدل ما تحتاج ترول باك لحاجة ما فيهاش الفيتشر بتاعتك and you also lose other features, then turning off the feature flag is the way to go. وآخر حاجة ال DRI handbook, which is يعني a guideline that also gets developed over time. Again, زي ما قلنا قبل كده, processes دي is an ever evolving process, and يعني no one has the right answer, and also it depends on how the team functions and the service that they're building. Building this handbook is basically a guide for anyone who's done the DRI, to be able to respond quickly to certain scenarios. There should be a DRI handoff every week لما الروتيشن بيخلص بتاع واحد بيحكي اللي حصل في الأسبوع بتاعه، الحاجات اللي لسه ما اتحلتش and also the lessons learned to يعني improve the process moving forward. And probably the most effective scenario for life site incidents is the post-mortem meeting. Post-mortem meeting ده بيحصل لما يبقى فيه severity عالية of an incident that happened, even if it was mitigated pretty quickly. Companies still encourage people to have these post-mortem meetings. Basically اللي بيحصل ان people just go over the incident, try to analyze the root cause, learn what they need to change moving forward, mostly adding more alerts, restricting certain permissions, depending on the incident. But most of the time, the lessons learned are just actions that need to be done to prevent an identical scenario or even similar scenarios. يعني ساعات الناس بتتعلم حاجات ما حصلتش لسه، بس يعني if this happened then this might happen, so might as well add those extra action items. الكي تيك اويز من الكلام اللي انا قلته ده، انا عارف خلصت بدري شويه، بس we can have any Q&As that people have. بس يعني I want to again highlight the very first point, and يعني it's the process. People do make mistakes and we have to expect this. انا يعني حاجه ما قلتلكمش في القصه بتاعت engineer A and engineer B. engineer B ده يعني I know him personally, and أنا فاكر لما حصلت الانسيدنت دي because he was the one who deployed it to production. Obviously when everything crashed he was the first one to be blamed. أنا فاكر إن هو كان مرعوب وكان رايح الشغل تاني يوم عارف إنه هيترفد يعني. This incident cost I think millions of dollars in the few hours of the drop. But to his surprise and to everyone's surprise, the incident يعني was not even focusing on him at all. يعني الموضوع كله كان ايه اللي حصل، ازاي حاجه زي كده حصلت. Let's understand the code changes, let's understand the missing parts that should have stopped this, فين المetrics, فين alarms, and they just improved the service and life went on as if nothing happened. So always blame the process, always point at what's missing in the process and improve it. People do make mistakes and it's totally fine. And if you're building a team and you want to invest in a quality service, instead of focusing on training them, or you should be training them, instead of focusing on making sure that they never make mistakes, just invest more in building a proper process. This will help you protect yourself and the service from people who make a lot of mistakes, which is fine, and also helps you from people who don't usually make mistakes and they eventually will. So investing in the process is always the best way to protect your service. Laying out layers of protection, continuous integration and development. Again, the emphasis here is on the automation of testing and preventing any deployments or merging if they don't pass the quality of code. The deployment stages, the phased rollout is a critical part. I've seen many incidents that arise by just feeling very confident in the deployment, but then you release it to the entire public and then you have to roll back. If you had just rolled it out to a certain percentage of people, then you would have been able to catch it and not affect that many people. The service level agreement is also a very critical part because عشان دي اللي بتحط البريشر على live incidents to be resolved really quickly. An on-call person is a necessity. مفيش أي live service can function without an on-call person. أنا فاكر Amazon I think كان واحد من السينيور managers كان بيقول لي if you're working on a service that doesn't have an on-call rotation, then you're probably working on a service that's not very important. It's part of the flow of any service. No matter how well you've written the code, no matter how many tests or verifications you've done, you still need an on-call person. It's not a very fun experience, but it is a necessity. And the only thing that I can advise is to try to improve the automation of how to deal with certain incidents to help the DRI or the on-call person not have to spend hours trying to mitigate an issue. واخر حاجه البوست مورتم كلتشر. يعني في ناس كتير لما بتسمع كلمه بوست مورتم بتخاف، يعني تحس ان يعني الميتنج ده هيبتدي الناس تعرف ان انا عملت غلطات. again unfortunately this does happen، وساعات البليم بيبتدي يبان حتى um, يعني سطري شويه. بس يعني any company should be enforcing or يعني promoting a positive culture in the post-mortem that يعني it doesn't matter who did what. حتى لو حد عك الدنيا وعمل، حتى لو غلطة عبيطة مثلا يعني عملت كارثة، it's totally fine. The whole point is again how did that pass through the process and what's missing and what should we do to fix it. Doesn't matter who did it or what did they do, how stupid the problem was. It's all about the process and how to fix it. بس يعني ده كل كنت عايز احكيه لكم. لو حد عايز يبدأ any questions I'm all ears. شايف خالد جعفر: I know this cycle of software but what is the main stage should I focus on as software engineering especially backend as student or junior. مش انا مش فاهم قصدك ايه بمين ستيج، بس يعني if you want مثلا to grow as an engineer in general. um, I think junior engineers and fresh grads, they just have to gain the first 2 or 3 years of experience in any company. الترانزيشن ما بين حد لسه متخرج او اشتغل حتى في شركات صغيرة او عمل freelancing work on their own and then they move into a tech company that has to deal with customer facing projects, high scale, high throughput, high QPS, a lot of challenges that come with all of this. ومفيش حد يعرف يشرحه لك، عشان كده يعني حتى نادرا لما تلاقي فيه كورسات على الكلام ده او يعني even training في الكلية ليه. It has to be hands-on experience. I think يعني what you should be focusing on is trying to learn from the team, trying to learn from software engineers, trust the more senior people. ساعات الحاجات اللي بيقولوها it doesn't make sense to you, بس it's built upon different experiences and incidents that they had to deal with. ف just try to learn from the people around you as much as you can. أنا مش هقول مثلا ركز على algorithms or problem solving الكلام ده كله to pass the interviews. We all know this. لكن ال transition from a junior to a more established engineer has to come from hands-on experience and through learning from more senior people in the team. مش حد عنده أي سؤال تاني؟ Okay. I hope يعني people found some of what I said useful, and I'm sure a lot of what I shared في ناس كتير سمعت عنه قبل كده. I'm hoping that I portrayed a journey of some experiences of how these are actually implemented in real life. When I'm sure those who are still starting their career will have to go through this experience themselves. All the best ليكوا كلكوا. We hope to be able to meet you in person one day soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.